Hello, everyone. It's Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation, and I've got two of my friends from the Contrarians. We've got Reed Littles, and we've got Tim from Tim's Vinyl Confessions and the Contrarians. How are you, gents?
Doing great, Peter. Can't wait to relive the Elder.
Fantastic. All righty. What we are going to do is we are going to rebuild the album by Kiss, The Elder. So The Elder came out in 1981 to universal disdain. It was one of Kiss's least successful commercial albums. It has been appraised over recent years to be somewhat better than it was regarded in the day. But I put a challenge to both Reed and Tim that what we would do is we would retain maybe 5 or 6 of the Kiss songs in the album and then pick 5 or 6 Kiss songs from any of their discography and build a better album, The Elder. And we will match it to maybe a storyline, because it is a concept album per se. So what I'll do firstly is I'll talk to Tim and Reed. Tim, what was your first impressions of The Elder in the day, if any?
Well, I didn't get into Kiss until 1993. Which is kind of an odd time, but it is when. And I kind of talked about this when we did a Contrarians episode on The Elder, because I am one of those freaks that actually kind of like the album. But I've said this before, if I'd been a Kiss fan waiting for a new album to come out in 1981, and this is what we got, I don't know if I'd like it. But looking back and listening to all of the catalog, or all the catalog that existed as a whole, I've always kind of admired how it's so strange that they would make the decisions that they made to put this album together. I've always been fascinated by this whole period in their history from 80 to 83. And I get a lot of enjoyment out of the album. It's not one that I put on all the time, and I can certainly understand why people wouldn't like it. But, I was 7 when this album came out, so I wasn't actively listening to anything remotely hard rock. But when I first heard it, it was more of just a fascination. And another thing I liked about it, or another thing that intrigued me about listening to it, is that anytime I would read interviews with Gene or Paul, they were very dismissive of it, and they almost tried to act like it never existed. And of course, that made me want to know why. Yes. What is so bad about this? And why did they do it in the first place? And I just wanted to know more. So I was so much into finding out about this album when I first listened to it. Me and my good friend Matt, who you've met, Matt Phillips, we had a vinyl version of it, and we would sit and try to write out what we thought all the lyrics were. That's how much we got into this album. So I don't have a firsthand experience of when it came out, but I will say that I myself enjoy the album, but I understand those that don't.
Yeah. Thanks, Tim. What about you, Reed? What was your first impressions of this album? I believe you were a little bit late to the party in listening to this one.
Yeah, interesting, because I jumped on the Kiss bandwagon in 1976. Now, I was 8 years old, like a lot of kids, attracted to the primary colors and the bright albums, and Destroyer, Rock and Roll Over a Love Gun, Alive 2. That was my introduction to Kiss. And I got to see them live on the Dynasty tour. In fact, one of the shows that's on Kissology is the show that I saw live. Or possibly, they did 2 nights and they only kept one of the recordings. So I'm either at that one or I was at the one they didn't keep. I don't know which one it was. But anyway, even at that point, now I was 11 in 1979, and watching that show, I went, this is it. This is the best this band is ever going to be, and just forgot all about them. So I didn't carry that with me until I saw the video, either for Lick It Up or All Hell's Breaking Loose. I don't know which one came out first, but I saw it on MTV, them without makeup, and I instantly knew that's Paul Stanley. They went makeupless. And then, so I got Lick It Up and then went back to Creatures of the Night. But people told me music from The Elder is bad, so I avoided it. And I love 80s Kiss. I'm infamous on the Contrarians for being the biggest booster of 80s Kiss. I love not just Creatures of the Night, although I love that album. I love Lick It Up. I love Animalize. I love Asylum, which is my favorite Kiss album. I even love Crazy Nights. I love all of the 80s albums. So it wasn't until I was staying with a friend in 1988 that he had a copy of Music from the Elder. And I thought, I've avoided this album long enough. Let's put it in and see what's going on. And then afterwards, I took it out of the cassette player and went, I understand now why everybody hates this album. And I never listened to it again until the Contrarians did a breakdown of The Elder. And I was the only person on that show who said, this album sucks. You guys are delusional for liking it.
And that's why I've got you as a guest and I've got Tim as a guest. So this is going to be a perfect counterpoint for this discussion. Wonderful. Australia came really late to the Kiss party. Dynasty was absolutely huge. I Was Made for Loving You was number one. When they toured in 1980 and they had Eric Carr as the drummer, Peter Criss had left the band, they were given the keys to Sydney. They were standing at the top of the town hall. It's footage on YouTube and people actually wagged school to go and see it. It was like Beatlemania. They were absolutely huge. Unmasked, that was a huge album. But alas, this album was not so big. I have not seen more albums in the bargain bins of any record store within a couple of months than this album. They were selling it for 99 cents. They had the little cutoff and they couldn't still turn it over. It was there. So I never listened to it. I avoided it for a considerable period of time. It's only maybe like Reed in the last 10 years that I listened to it and I liked it. I could see it's a flawed album. It's not perfect. The storyline is quite mawkish. Some would say a little bit incomprehensible, but there's a bit of bravery about it. There's a lot of Bob Ezrin flourishes. If you know his work from Alice Cooper, Destroyer, and a little bit of Pink Floyd The Wall, and reading articles with Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, that's why they gravitated to a concept album, because The Wall by Pink Floyd was a smash and they wanted some of that juju. They wanted to drink that the cup of success from that album. So I think it's a great album in the sense that it's got some really fine, heavy stuff, but it's got some flaws. And hence the reason for this show is let's build a bigger beast. Let's pull it apart, keep the songs that we like, but put some songs from the vast Kiss discography and build a better and stronger album. All right. So I'm going to throw it across to you, Tim. Take it away, your show, your little bit. So what's your Kiss the Elder Rebooted?
Well, it's interesting. It was cool to hear Reed talk about, discovering that a friend of his actually had it. Because a lot of people didn't have it. It wasn't a big seller. So to find someone that did have it, it must have been like, you've got the Elder? Like, is that allowed? It was like, the album that dare not speak its name, right? I will say this, I'm guessing the reason, Peter, that you saw so many copies that were, marked down is because Unmasked was such a big seller in Australia. And I know Shandy was a big hit single there. So I'm sure that, Polygram in Australia thought, okay, well, this next one's going to be big too. Why wouldn't it be? And they must have pressed more copies percentage wise, because it's probably the album that you come across the least as Kiss collectors. If you're starting a Kiss, collection of any kind, you just don't run across copies of Music from the Elder. You'll find copies of Destroyer and Dynasty and sometimes beaten up, most of the time not having all of the inserts that originally came with it. But you pretty much have to go on eBay and other things like that to find copies of the Elder. And I have to hold this up. This was the hardest thing that I had to find.
Nice.
This is a UF 8-track version. Very good shape, but yeah.
It is.
My what I did for this was I simply took 5 songs out and replaced them with 5 other Kiss songs. And in a couple of cases, I took out songs I actually liked, but I put in songs that either directly thematically fit the storyline. I really didn't do anything with the storyline. I kept the very loose framework of the storyline as it was. But either, thematically they fit lyrically, or musically I could hear how they would work in this context. And I've got something from 5 different albums, and it spans the Kiss career. And I'm going to go by the, it's not my choice for track listing, but I've got the remastered CD here from 1997, which supposedly puts the track listing in the correct story order. If anybody wants to dig deeper into the Elder too, I would highly recommend a book called Odyssey by Tim McFate and Julian Gill. It's so meticulously mapped out, everything you ever want to know about the Elder, and a bunch of stuff you never even thought of, like the idea of him actually recording narrations for it and having narrations in between tracks, which might have helped with the somewhat muddled storyline. But anyway, so I'm gonna go through the album. Songs that are supposed to be there, I'll leave in place. But where I took a song out, I'll tell you what I put it in its place. So it starts out with a little fanfare, then the Just a Boy, which is a 1-2 punch of why they were probably wise in mixing up the song order and having it open with the Oath. So the next song is very uncharacteristic Kiss song. Actually, there's 3 in a row that come out. So Odyssey comes out. And in its place, I put in the last song from this album, Psycho Circus. And the song is Journey of 1,000 Years, which from the first time I got Psycho Circus, this always sounded like something that could have been on the Elder. So, it's Odyssey, it's a journey, it's definitely somewhere other than the norm for Kiss. So I thought that would sit in the place of Odyssey. It also reminded me of something that might have appeared on Gene's 1978 solo album. So the next song, Only You, which is one of my favorites from the album, I took that out and I went all the way back to the second album, Hotter Than Hell, for the song Strange Ways. Now, lyrically, it doesn't fit exactly. This is a song that Ace wrote and that Peter sang, but just the chorus, Strange Ways, Twist of Fate, I thought would work for this council of elders hearing this young boy's story and wanting to know if he's worthy of the fellowship and all of that stuff. It's a very strange song. It's a very uncharacteristic song all around. So I thought that would work in the place of Only You. So next up is Under the Rose, which is a really it's really frightening in its intensity. The chorus, it's got the low baritone chorus along with Gene's vocal. So in the place of that, I went with this album and I chose the song Great Expectations. And again, not everything lyrically matches up, and it's like Great Expectations. And at one point, Gene says, "Do you want to play the role? Will you sacrifice your soul?" Kind of the same thing as Under the Rose. Will you sacrifice? It's that same idea. And I always thought Great Expectations doesn't really fit on Destroyer, and I doesn't really fit on the Elder. So in a bizarro world, I would have switched those 2 songs. But anyway, what do we got next? So next up is Dark Light. I'm leaving that one in place. That's a fun Ace tune. Does it tell the story? I guess it kind of does. I really love the fact that Ace hates this album, but yet he delivers, I think, a really quirky song, and I like the guitar playing on it, and I like the drums on it. Next is, the closest thing to a hit single on it, The World Without Heroes. I left that in. And then the Oath, which is one of my favorites. I took off the Oath, and I'm so used to that being the opening track, but it's not. But the Oath is basically the boy is singing about why he is worthy of doing this. So Reed's going to like this. I went to this album, And I picked the song My Way, which doesn't sound at all like it's from the Elder, but lyrically it kind of fits with this sort of self-determination thing. So, and right after that, we go to the villain, Mr. Blackwell. I took that out and I put in the song Hate, which is the opening track on Carnival of the Souls. I thought that was a good substitute for that. And then it's the instrumental Escape from the Island and I. That's my sequencing and reimagining of probably a good half of the Elder album. Those are the songs that I would put in.
I'd buy that. That you sold me. That's well done, Tim. That's a really, really good long song sequence. All right, I'll throw it over to you, Reed.
Okay. Yeah, Tim, excellent job.
Well done.
I have to say, when I agreed to do this, and Peter and I went back and forth on whether I was going to participate in this, because I had some trepidation. And eventually I decided that if I was going to do this, the first thing that had to go was the idea of the storyline of the Elder. And I want to make it absolutely clear, I have no issue whatsoever with heavy rock and fantasy-oriented music. People get really precious about that now and hating on fantasy lyrics. That's been a factor ever since, Rainbow and Zeppelin were singing about hobbits back in the day. But I think it works great for the music. It just doesn't fit Kiss. So I originally came up with an entire storyline that I was trying to fit together that didn't really work out, that was going to be about the fashion industry. And I couldn't quite get that to hang together. So instead I thought, why am I fighting this? Go with the obvious story. So I have retitled my album Music from the Streets.
Right.
Because Kiss is the band of the New York streets, right? So I also am a firm believer that a good concept album does not necessarily have to tell the story through the lyrics, right? The lyrics are more about mood and theme. And maybe you can, it's more like Ziggy Stardust, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. There's no storyline on that album. There are a couple of songs that you can sort of squint and see a story to, but you can think about what you've heard as the story while listening to it. So that's kind of how I constructed this. And I'm actually opening, my story is about a cab driver named Johnny. So Johnny's down on his luck. He's sitting in his apartment. He's thinking about how life sucks. And the first song is going to be A World Without Heroes. So I actually like opening a hard rock album with a more mellow song because it makes the next song hit harder, right? Instead of just jumping right in, which is exciting, and that's an approach. But mine, Johnny's he's not in that place, right? He's down. So he's sitting there thinking, there are no heroes. There's nothing to aspire to. Life in the city's grinding him down. Well, then he has an even worse realization. He is out of booze. Life sucks, and now he doesn't even have booze to make him feel better. Cue cold gin. His heater's broke. He's so tired. He's got to go down to the store and get a pint of the cheap stuff, right? So as he leaves his house, before he leaves his apartment, I should say, Johnny takes his last hit of his psychedelic substance of choice, and he's tripping balls on the way down to the liquor store. So cue the song The Odyssey, which is very spacey, and he's looking up at the streetlights, and he thinks that they're stars, and he's dreaming about sailing through the stars as he's walking underneath these streetlights. Well, as he's walking down the mean streets, tripping and looking at the streetlights, the street hustler comes up to him, and he looks him up and he looks him down, and he says, "Hey man, what be this and what be that? And why you gotta look like that?" So of course, cue all hell's breaking loose. So Johnny fronts, right? Because that's what you do on the mean streets when somebody calls you out. He fronts and he acts like he's the coolest thing ever. But deep down, he knows that he's just a drunk, druggy, down on his luck cab driver and things are not going his way. And then he sees the girl of his dreams walking down the street and he starts to follow her. Cue Strutter. He knows her just enough to say hi. Her name's Rosa. And he follows Rosa and he thinks, that is the girl that I want, but I'm not worthy. I'm just not, she deserves better than a down on her luck cab driver, right? So he's following Rosa down the road and he's thinking about it. And then cue Under the Rose. What would he be willing to sacrifice in order to be worthy of Rose? Okay. Oops. Sorry, I'm working on two computers here. I get my mice mixed up sometimes. All right, so of course, now Johnny he finally reaches his cab. He gets in his cab and he turns on the radio. And his favorite song comes on the radio. And he gets so pumped up listening to this song. He's like, wait, I'm not a loser. I'm cool. I was just telling that guy I'm cool. I am that cool. I deserve this. I believe in me. And cue the song, I. Okay? Except that Johnny is still high. He's driving high. He's on his way to get booze. Kids, don't do drugs and drive. But the future is not looking good for Johnny. Dark things are on the horizon. So cue Dark Light. Ace tells us, bad things are coming. That's kind of the entire point of that song. I don't think Ace had a specific point, but that's the general gist of the lyrics, is that things are not going to end up well. And then you actually can get two versions of my album because the next song determines Johnny's fate. And he dies, spoiler, in both versions. The version I like better, Johnny decides to make the midnight show, right? He hears his song and it pulls him through. So it comes on strong and tells him what he's got to do. Cure Detroit Rock City, or cue Detroit Rock City. He gets in his car. He's driving along. He's still tripping balls. He doesn't see the truck coming. Head-on collision. Exit Johnny. In the alternate version, Johnny actually follows Rosa all the way back to where she lives. Except she's Tito's girl, and Tito gets mad and kills him. And you cue Hide Your Heart instead of Detroit Rock City. And then we're going to finish off the album with the moral of the story, don't do drugs. But since Kiss never did a don't do drugs song, we're going to finish it off with the street giveth and the street taketh away. Because that's just the final message here. Johnny, he almost had it and then he blew it because he was a dumbass. Music from the streets.
I'm flabbergasted.
I love it. That's amazing. I love the fact that we all took different approaches. I never would have thought of that, but as soon as you're setting these up, said I know where he's going with this. His name's Johnny. Oh, Rosa, gotcha. I know. Wow. And you still managed to incorporate a fair bit of the Elder music in there.
But in all fairness, so whenever I do these things, I make a playlist and I go through and I listen to the songs several times. I skip those damn songs from the Elder. I hate them so much. There is not one song in my album that I actually like except for the non-Elder music. So, but I still like it better than the original because at least there are 5 songs on it I like.
Hey, you've got to market this album. Come on.
For all the compilations that Kiss put out, they should be doing odd things like this. Yeah, why not? But no, that was really good, and some really good songs from the 80s. Because the street, give the street, take the way. I never would have saw that coming, but that is a perfect ending for it. And I love how you set it up almost like one of those choose your own adventure books. Granted, they both end badly, but it's you got to choose, as it were.
Right. Good reference.
Absolutely. I think for Reed's album, would you have to use a different door? Maybe it needs a steel door with grime and graffiti on it.
Yeah,
it's got to be. That's not a very New York door, is it?
Certainly not in Johnny's neighborhood. No.
And Johnny is played by John Travolta, I believe.
Yes, yeah. Oh, that was the other thing is Johnny's walk down the streets was inspired by Saturday Night Fever. John Travolta strutting down the streets.
Yes.
I kind of wondered if you weren't going to borrow a little bit and use New York Groove.
Oh, Reed's going, oh.
I could have shoehorned that in, but yeah, I liked where it ended up.
Yeah. No, that's pretty awesome. Thank you, Reed. And all right, over to me. How do I follow that act?
You can do it.
Okay. Well, my plot line is sort of similar to the Gene storyline for the Elder. So we've got a boy or an adolescent who's a reincarnation of a spirit of an alien force that was on Earth thousands and thousands of years ago, and through visions calls out to him to see if he's a chosen one, because they need him to join their army to see if he's worthy, because there are disturbances in the force, disturbances in the planets. So what they do is they set him on an odyssey journey through the desert, through the towns, through the cities. He encounters various temptations, peoples, forces, both good and evil, just to see if he is worthy to be one of them and to join them in the fight to equalize the forces and neutralize the disturbance. I started off with the Odyssey. So that was track one. I like it. It's got that lush orchestral cinematic type of start, and I think this is what this sort of story or this album needs. You've got Stanley crooning, and from a far off galaxy I hear you calling me, we are on an odyssey. So that sets up the scene of the adolescent on his journey. And then I went to the second one. I think if you've got to have Paul starting the story, you've got to have a counterpoint of Gene as well, because the two alpha males got to be on even Stevens. And I picked Journey of 1,000 Years, Psycho Circus. I, like you, Tim, heard that song and I thought, yep, that's Elder. It's time you opening the door. Now it's clear the Journey of 1,000 Years fits the plot. And methinks it may have been an offshoot of maybe an old song from the Elder session. Then I go track 3, Only You. Only you have the answers, but the questions you have to find. Only you know the secrets, but the truth lies deep in your mind. So again, it's, pushing the boy on this journey, on this odyssey. So that's the first section. So it's kind of in 3 acts. And then the next bit is where the boy goes on his odyssey, and he faces all sorts of temptations. There's temptations on the opposite sex of, and I put in Heaven's on Fire, the evil temptations, and I put a segue of Who Wants to Be Lonely. So you got those sort of temptations on his journey. Then I chose another track called Unholy. So he encounters both dark forces that sort of challenge his realization of life, a life with no religion, a life of darkness, a life of evil. So all these really shady characters as he's going on this conceptual journey, through the various, cities and towns, et cetera, And then the finale of this little section, I put War Machine off Creatures of the Night, which is just war and violence. So this little middle section, temptations of the opposite sex, evil of violence and war. And then I've chosen the next one, Paralyzed from Revenge, where he's completely gutted and feels empty because he's been exposed to all these different dark forces, and he's just questioning himself. What am I doing on this on this journey. Where am I? The lyrics that speak out to me: don't see nothing in my eyes because, man, I've been lobotomized. Cold inside and theater size because life has just got me paralyzed. So it's one of those songs where it's just reflection, and he's gone through all this crap and met all these different had all these really bad experiences, all good and bad. And then it segues into a world without heroes. The Lou Reed song is like a world without sun. But the alien forces, in seeing this adolescent going on his journey, see that he's gone through all of these impediments, all these hurdles. He's had the patience of Job in biblical times, but he's got through it, and they see that he's made of the right stuff. And this goes into the finale, or the little triplet finale. I put the oath. Basically this is a transition song where the boy goes into manhood and he's surrendering to the higher power. He becomes a warrior. The alien forces believe that this boy is going to be he is the right stuff, and he got through that middle section. He got through all the temptations. And I've thrown in on track 10 a little bit of, I put in Shout It Out Loud, which is a little bit of a fist pump in the air, that he's going to be accepted and part of this alien force, and be a warrior. And then I do the finale of I, which is a bit of, I believe in me, and I believe all the power is within yourself. You don't need to depend on other people's. It's like a self-empowerment song, and that's the finale. So the story's all, it's probably like a Battlefield Earth type of story, but that's how I hang my track listing. And a bit of a cross-section of 80s songs and a few 70s thrown in. There you go.
I think it's cool that you used Journey of 1,000 Years. That song was just, I've always thought that, of just kind of sitting there waiting to be plucked. Because I like the album, but I understand that I'm talking about Psycho Circus, but I think a lot of it has to do with, I love the title song so much that it kind of painted my view of the rest of it. It does tend to wear a little thin by the end, but Journey of 1,000 Years, I think, ends the album beautifully, but it doesn't really fit the album. It fits something like this. And the other thing that I forgot to mention with Reed, did you make your protagonist a cab driver because Ace was a cab driver, or was that just a coincidence?
No, it's Paul, wasn't it? Wasn't Paul the cab driver? Maybe they were both.
Well, maybe he was, but I thought Ace was at one point as well. But I know at one point he worked in a liquor store, which somebody was like putting a fox in charge of the hen house. But I thought Ace was a cab driver too. But
yeah, I mean, possible. But I definitely chose that because I knew that somebody in the band had been a cab driver.
It's very New York. I mean, at one point they might have all done that, but
yeah.
But Ace, talking about Ace, driving drunk, it just made me think of, him crashing the DeLorean and all of that.
Right.
I think Ace needs to stay away from cars.
Yeah.
But just picking up what you were saying earlier, Tim, it's really funny that these Paul and Gene just completely wash their hands of it. And if you ever go to a KISS convention, and I watch a lot of the YouTube shows in the Q&As, there's always a bunch of questions about the Elder, and they sort of cringe and they really wash their hands of it. But if this was an ultra successful album that sold 10 million copies like The Wall, they would have a different take on it.
Their perception is colored by the sales. It's all about commercial success, and it didn't sell. Now, lately, I know, Martin's been on a couple shows talking about RIAA listings, how well an album is sold. And I have to think that if Universal are doing what they're supposed to be doing, sooner or later, there's got to be enough people, people like me that bought the CD and then bought the remastered CD. I think it'll certify gold eventually, but oops.
You're still
sorry.
on.
My battery died on me.
No, you're still here.
I'm still here. Oh, that's weird. Okay, let's come unplugged. But anyway, yeah, there's got to be enough people that are going to buy the Elder. I think it eventually will go gold. Not that that matters, but they love bragging about how many gold records they have. But I'm just saying there's quality stuff on there. And more than anything, it's just the gutsiness that they had. I know it was seen as a calculated thing coming off of, Ezra's success with The Wall, but it's still Kiss. They were still fighting that perception because they always seem to have this identity crisis about them. And we as fans appreciate a lot of the different things they did, but from the outside, it looks like they just jumped from one thing to another. And this is probably the most extreme example of them jumping into another thing. And they never did anything like that again, except for, like I said, I think Gene, more than anything, embraced the comic book superhero aspect of it. And that's why you get things like Journey of 1,000 Years, or a lot of the songs on his solo album, like Mr. Make Believe and, See You in Your Dreams and things like that. I think Gene would one-on-one would probably defend the Elder, but Paul is totally dismissive of it. He had vocal issues with it. He had problems with his high range. That's why he sang in falsetto in some of the songs. So I don't think it brings up a very good time in his life. That has a lot to do with it too. I think that I think The Oath is a great performance for Eric Carr to prove why he got the job. And even Ace, I love Ace's playing on Dark Light. I think it's a fun, quirky little song, like the best of Ace Kiss songs are. But I like what all of us did and how we interpreted it in different ways and brought in really quite a variety of songs. I think as far as songs that aren't on the Elder, I think the Journey of 1,000 Years is the only repeat, isn't it? I think we had all different songs, which is that says a lot about our interpretations of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think a lot of the mystique that the album maintains does come from the fact that they're saying, no, don't look at this album, because that makes people go, oh, I'm not supposed to look at it? This is the worst thing ever? You always develop a cult following around, what's the worst movie ever? Well, you're going to debate it, but there's a certain percentage of the population that's going to go seek it out and say, why is it the worst movie ever?
One of the best quotes I ever heard, and it's so true, was the author Chuck Klosterman, who said that if you like a band, you're interested in the high points of their career. But if you love a band, you're interested in the worst parts of their career. You're interested when they're in their absolute low. You want to know more about that period. And for Kiss, this would be it. When they put out an album that doesn't even sell well enough to justify doing a tour, there's so little footage of this era. They've got the 3 songs they did on that show Fridays. They got the World Without Heroes video. The I video went unseen for decades. And, they didn't want you to know about it, it's that putting the parental advisory sticker on something. Teenagers are going to buy it because it's got that sticker on it. I better look at this. I want to look at this. You can't, just because you said I shouldn't look at it, that makes me want to look at it more. So I think there is a lot to do with that. And it just brings back such fun memories of me just getting into the band in general. Because like I said, I got into the catalog pretty much all at once, like the first album through Revenge. And this was just one of the albums, but it's one of the albums that as they started to buy the CDs thinking, okay, I'm going to finally sink my teeth into this Elder business that I keep hearing so many bad things about. I need to hear it for myself. And when I finally listened to it, I think it's because I did hear so many bad things. It's like, it's not that bad, but it's just, it'll never be accepted as a good Kiss album. And, it just says a lot about our fandom that we can disagree on these things, but we're still debating people have been debating the Elder since it came out. And here we are so many years later, we're still debating the album and how would we do it differently?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I really like this album a lot, and I would head and shoulders listen to this album above, say, Monster, all those later Kiss albums. I play this quite regularly, and I think it's, as I said in my earlier spiel, it's flawed, but there's some really outstanding rock tracks. heavy rock tracks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I know Martin is fond of saying that on Unmasked, Kiss didn't know what they were doing. And I've always fought against that narrative because, and we did a whole show here on Rock Daydream Nation deconstructing Unmasked. But Unmasked is very much a continuation of Dynasty. And Dynasty was a very successful album. No matter how much people want to push back against Dynasty, it's the 6th best selling album in Kiss's catalog. It is a huge album. And there's every reason in the world to go, success, we need more of that. But then The Elder is just so different from that. So I think this is the album where they are so far out of their league. They are in so far over their heads. Yes, they were swimming in new waters. They were trying new things. And sometimes you get great art that way, and sometimes you get The Elder.
Absolutely. And it's all about...
I don't think Unmasked was unfocused either. I think that they said, let's do a pop album. Even Ace wrote great. He talked to me. That's a great pop song. You know, Gene got in on. I think that Unmasked was very focused. I love Dynasty. Dynasty and Creatures of the Night, as different as they are probably my favorite Kiss albums. The ones that I listen to more than anything else. But the 360-degree turns that they made, like I said, from 80 to 83, you get Unmasked into The Elder. The Elder from Creatures isn't that big a difference. If you listen to songs like The Oath and Mr. Blackwell, they were getting heavy. Yep. Creatures just got heavier and lost the concept. Lick It Up, pretty heavy, not quite as heavy as Creatures of the Night, but 4 very different albums in a 4-year span. And this was just, I don't know that, it isn't so much that I don't think they didn't know what they were doing. I don't think they wanted to do it, but I think they felt like they had to do it. But, you know, when I say they, I mean Paul and Gene. Ace was against it from the get-go, and Eric was a hired hand. He was an employee, so he wasn't going to have much of a say, although he did co-write Under the Rose, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you read a lot of the articles or interviews with Gene, and he says, we wrote an album for the critics, which I find a bit of a head scratch. They've always been the anti-critics band. You know, all of their albums have been more or less panned, except maybe Destroyer was a bit of an outrider. That may be another discussion point. But I think you raised a very good point. There is a lot of diversity, a lot of musical curiosity between the years 79 to 83.
Yeah.
I think there's so much hate, Tim, because it all comes to entry point. My entry point to Kiss was the Australian years, which is the nadir of the American audience. I think Kiss was just so revered in that era of Alive and Rock and Roll All Over and what people classified as the golden years. And to just turn things sonically different was quite shocking for a lot of people. And a lot of people just left the Kiss train completely. And this album is sort of like, it's just the album that we just can't talk about.
Yeah, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, every classic rock band goes through this. There's peaks and valleys.
Yes.
Kiss thought that they could get big and stay big. That's not realistic. Nobody does that. So you go through these valleys so you can come back up. And they did come back up, you know, with Lick It Up and Animalize. They had platinum albums again. And, you know, who would have thought that when this came out in 1981, that Kiss would still be doing this elongated farewell tour in 2023? Like, no one would have thought that in any way, shape, or form based on the performance of The Elder. But you got to remember that 1981 is just 1 year in a very long career.
Absolutely. Well said. Well, thank you, gentlemen. This was a lot of fun. As I said, I'm glad that I twisted both your arms in regards to doing this show. Just to hear your song listing and the concept behind it was really neat. And, you know, we should do this sort of thing again. I think it was a really cool idea. So please read little on the Contrarians. Please check out Tim's wonderful channel on Tim's Vinyl Confessions and the Contrarians. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. One thing's for sure, the three of us, you'll see us on a show pretty soon. Cheers.